Sir Stanley, many thanks for agreeing to do this interview and of course for chairing the first working party under the new strategy for justice. Now, our members will already be familiar with your career and your history on the bench, but could you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the Justice Working Party?
I was at a debate on human rights in the European Convention and was invited to the dinner afterwards. Bill Cash, a noted anti-European, was there, and he and I had a ding-dong because I am I consider human rights to be terribly important and the European Convention to be important in supporting them. I was then asked to come along to justices' offices, and I was asked whether I would like to chair a working party, and a number of subjects were mentioned. I considered and do consider the subject of the working party, which I chose to chair and did chair, to be of great importance having regard to recent changes.
Could you tell us a bit about how this working party actually worked in practice?
Well, we were very lucky to have a broad range of qualifications and experience, and really a very distinguished working party. I suppose sometimes distinguished working parties argue among themselves, but we didn't. We cooperated very well. We arrived at our conclusions by consensus. So I was very happy with the experience. I did not write the report, but the report bears out with some precision exactly what the conclusions of the working party were.
Justice has already set up another working party, and our idea is very much to set up more over the coming year to look at big picture issues like the one that we've looked at. What did you expect of your members, and is it something that you would recommend to others?
Well, I think I would expect members of a working party to have relevant experience, to be able to make a valuable contribution, and that involves, of course, some time, both in investigation sometimes, looking at the evidence, and discussing the conclusions to be drawn from it. So there's quite a lot of input that I would expect from members, and one wants them to be as highly qualified and experienced as possible.
And would you recommend the experience to others?
Well, I would. I enjoyed it, mainly because we got on very well. We didn't have any marked dissension.
Yes. Now, turning to this report, what are the key recommendations of your working party?
Well, there are two key recommendations, really. The first is that we feel that having regard to the lack of legal aid as a result of recent changes and the prevalence of litigants in person resulting from that, more assistance needs to be given to ordinary people who, for one reason or another, need to have access to the courts and indeed to many tribunals as well. And that can most efficiently be done by perhaps young, legally qualified personnel, whom we call registrars, but there's no magic in the name, who would be able to look at the papers as they come in, to analyse the issues, to see whether there are issues which should be raised because litigants in person don't appreciate all the relevant issues to their case, whether they're claimants or defendants, to ask them to produce further evidence where necessary, and then to decide on what course is best for the case. It may mean telling the claimant that actually it's a hopeless case, or the defendant that he has a very difficult case. It may mean offering early neutral evaluation. It may mean offering mediation. It may mean offering a decision by that person himself, or it may mean that the case is sufficiently important or complex for it to go to a judge. If it goes to a judge, there would be a trial in the normal way, but by the time the matter gets to the judge, the issues and the evidence would have been prepared in a way that is not possible under our present system. Secondly, we feel there is great need for a very greatly expanded, radical expansion of the system for giving advice to ordinary people who can't afford to go to a solicitor and seek advice on the telephone and on the internet. The internet is now available to the great majority of people. We've studied systems in other countries, in particular Australia, New South Wales, British Columbia, and the Netherlands. They are far more developed than we are, and we should progress in a way that they have and adopt the solutions they are adopting.
The changes that you're recommending will naturally be considered very radical by some. Is this a big ask that you're setting up for the next government?
I don't think, and none of the Working Party thought it was a big ask. We thought the big ask had actually been created by the present government and previous governments as a result of very substantial cuts to legal aid and more recently increases in court fees and decreases in the budgets of the courts and tribunals, which are putting pressure on their work. Our democracy, the rule of law, depend on people having access to courts and tribunals to resolve their claims and liabilities. Our system would enable them to have that recourse at a cost which would be significantly less than the cost of the present system. If one looks only at the cost, perhaps, of the courts, there would be savings even so far as that is concerned, but if one looks at the costs generally for society and other government departments, we think there would be very considerable savings if our recommendations were implemented.
I have one final question for you. What would you say to critics who might argue that actually changing the system or proposing recommendations of this sort is actually admitting defeat on the legal aid fight?
We are very concerned about the cuts to legal aid under this government and the previous government. But we have to be realistic. If you look at the manifestos of the major parties for the coming election, none of them are proposing a reinstatement of legal aid. None of them is proposing any increase in the budgets of the court service or the tribunals. We have to be realistic, and if it were up to us, I think we would reinstate legal aid, but that's not politically practical.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for this interview, and once again, Justice is very grateful to you for chairing our first working party under the new strategy.
It's been a great pleasure.